All right, Pickle, let's go ahead and get right into it. Like we mentioned earlier, we're going to continue our series in looking into the Texas high school football record books. And like I said, we've already looked at teams that have had the longest win streaks and consecutive wins. So now we're going to switch it up just a little bit, and we're going to look at programs that have the outright most wins in program history, as well as teams that have played the most games. And then we're going to finish it off with the actual percentage number of wins to games played. So let's go ahead and start off with the most wins in program history. Shattering the record books, Highland Park sits atop the list at 875 wins overall. That's one hell of a number. I mean, and it's not surprising. I mean, Randy Allen racking up most of those numbers there, but that's just really stinking impressive.
Yeah, Randy Allen's over
wins.
400 of that. So, I mean, that to me is what's impressive is not only is he, well, I guess he was at a couple other places, but, I mean, a good chunk of them being Randy Allen is one thing, but if you want to talk about program success in that form and fashion, is that's been consistency. I think the thing for me that is the most surprising is that they're ahead by, what is that, 55?
Almost
like,
60.
Insane.
Because all the rest of them are they're pretty close. But yeah, that's a big margin
to be ahead,
list
because you've got to think about that too, with there being a max of 15 games per year. I mean, this is multiple seasons ahead, or a max of 15 games per year, 16. That's insane.
Right. Mart coming up second on the list with 820 wins, which isn't surprising there either. Amarillo, the Golden Tornadoes, correct? Is that their mascot? With 813 wins
Sandys.
in program history. The Sandys. Okay, that's right. It looks like a little golden tornado.
I think that
Who's the Golden Tornadoes?
I think that you can go either way with it.
You
I know it's
can.
the Amarillo Sandys, but I believe their mascot is the Golden. That sounds dumb.
Yeah.
Gosh darn it.
Anyways, moving right along. At fourth on the list is the Temple Wildcats with almost breaking 800 wins. 700, they sit at 799. They'll, of course, probably break that this coming year.
And that will likely, if their first game's a home game, it'll likely be on Dave Campbell's Texan Live.
You're right.
Which is big time history there.
So, yeah. Plano coming up next, 776 wins. Refugio coming in sixth on the list with 775 wins. Longview, 769.
Galveston Ball is the Golden Tornadoes. That's
correct.
what it is. I knew it was Amarillo Sandys, but that is still a little tornado.
I think I had Galveston Ball on my top 10 favorite mascots that we did.
Yeah,
2
I'm
years
dumb.
ago.
I should have realized that they had the unbelievable defense this year.
That's right.
It's been a minute.
And then tied on the list with Longview are the Brownwood Lions with 769 wins at all. That's a lot of wins. And you're talking about programs that have, of course, been around for a very long time. This list is going to match up really, really well with the teams that have played the most games, just because these programs have been around for so long. But there's a couple of programs coming up on this list that haven't been around for nearly as long. They've just been unbelievably consistent through their tenure of a program.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's funny, too, to look through this list and think about when some of these teams were having their huge heydays. You know,
Galveston, Brownwood,
Plano was back when Tom Kimber was there in the 70s.
Yep.
I mean, just absolutely going. Longview has had their bits and spouts, and they've been really, really good consistently for a long time. But then they really, really started to peak in the late teens of the 2000s. And Brownwood, you go all the way back to there, and you think about everything that Gordon Wood did, and Highland Park's success has been obviously incredibly consistent, but it hasn't stopped. It's been insanely, I mean, anywhere from those 2013 to 2019, you know, those were the heydays of them. So it's funny to see all of the different, you know, time spans that this has stretched across.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's move on to most games played. Sitting atop the list is Mart with 1,221 games played. That's a lot of games. That is
Look
insane.
at that record.
I was just about to say.
820 and 358. Like, my God, for a program. That's not a coach. That's not a player. That is a program.
I wasn't going to include the records on this because I just think it's a lot of information. But I was like, man, these
that
are just
puts it into
so
perspective.
It does. It's so stinking impressive, and it really does put it into perspective on how consistent these programs are.
Right, because especially, and I know we'll get to the percentages in a minute, it's different seeing, 50% rather than seeing like a staggering number like that, 820 wins compared to the 358 losses.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's a lot. That's a lot. Plano coming up next at 1,215 games played. They will probably break that 20. They will break that 20 number coming up soon. But yeah, 776 wins, and that's I guess ties, right? 50 ties.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. I mean, that's really that's a great number. And then coming up in third, we've got Temple with 1,213, and they're about to. Well, they probably won't. Actually, they probably will pass Plano this year. I'm sure if they make the playoffs, they will pass Plano. There's a good chance.
There's a good chance.
Amarillo coming up in fourth at 1,207 games played. Brownwood, fifth on the list with 1,203. Corsicana, 1,202. Sherman at 1,185. And then Tyler coming up last on the list with 1,183. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the segment, but this is just 11-man. We did not include six-man
just UIL 11-man.
UIL 11-man. We did not include UIL 6-man football
or
in this.
private schools.
Or private schools, yes.
Yeah, just UIL 11-man.
Yes. But really impressive, especially when you look at – so I looked up when the Tyler football program came into fruition, and that was back in 1906, right? So they've played 1,183 games. Mm-hmm. But then you look at a team like Brownwood, and their program was established in 1953.
Goodness gracious.
So that's a big gap in years and when they've been established. And Brownwood surpassed that amount of games pretty substantially. I mean, almost 20 looking at it. It is 20 looking at it.
20 out of, what, 57 years?
Yeah.
Or 47 years? Yeah,
right.
47 years. That speaks, and this is another one of those things that's so funny to talk about, and we'll get there with the percentages, obviously, but it's one thing to look at the number of games that Tyler has won. That's a staggering amount. That's fantastic, winning 730, but when you hear that they've had 47 years longer to do it, and they're being surpassed by someone that wasn't even a program until after then.
Right.
I mean, that starts getting into, okay, when you're talking about the value of a program and what you're seeing in it, that's insane.
Yeah, right. Now let's get into percentages. I think, to me, this is probably the most interesting category because it combines the two. It combines wins, obviously, in program history, and it also includes the amount of games that they've played. So sitting atop the list is West Orange Stark, and they have an 80%, I guess, they've won 80% of their games, I guess, and that's insane. That is really insane. And I guess it would be saying something, if they created their program, if the program started a couple years ago, but I mean, look at the record that they've got right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just over, 550 games that they've played, and they've won 440 of them?
Right. 80%. That's insane. Coming in with 78% is South Lake Carroll. Really not a surprise there. They've been super consistent over the past couple of decades with 584 wins and only 157 losses.
Which is, again, it's so hard because it's how much do you put more stock into? Do you put more stock into West Orange Stark winning so many more of their games? Like South Lake Carroll has played so many more games and still is only 2% behind them. Like the longevity of being able to win 77% of your games when you've played over 600, close to 650 games.
Right.
Is that more impressive than winning 79% of your 550 games,
Right.
All of them. That's literally comparing, 1A, 1B.
Exactly.
But it is noteworthy to say that South Lake Carroll has so many more games than West Orange Stark, and yet their percentage obviously is still then deducted. So it almost, the longer you play, even if you keep winning, it almost does you a little bit dirty sometimes.
Right, exactly. Austin Westlake coming up third on the list with I've been rounding these up with 77%, which again the same kind of thing there. I mean they've got they've played quite a few more games than West Orange Stark has, but they still are a couple percent behind in third place.
Right, which this is a lot of the same conversation that we have when we put out our 6-year rankings.
Right.
And the reason that we do it is you have to have been a program for 6 years, because you think back to, like, in recent history, Shadow Creek in their first 2 seasons went on and played for state championships, won state championships.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so I think Brad Butler had lost 1 game in that span of time, and one of them was the state championship. And so it's like, yeah, their winning percentage as a program is like 99.9%.
Right.
But guess what? They've only played, 31 games maybe?
Yeah, right. And then, of course, Highland Park at 75%. Odessa Permian, back in the heyday, with 74%. And they're all so stinking close, too.
Yeah,
it's so
they
crazy
really
to look
are.
at this. Euless Trinity, of course, also back in the heyday, 72%. Refugio, 71%. 72 almost. And then rounding it out with Houston Yates in 8th place at almost 71%. I mean, man, look at how many, like, Highland Park's played. Obviously, they were on the list with the most wins. But the amount of games Highland Park's played and the amount of games that Refugio have played, and they're still atop this list, I mean, that's just, it's super, super impressive.
The Highland Park one is the most staggering one.
It is. It really is. I mean, 875 wins and only 263 losses in program history.
It's
just insane. I mean, it truly is.
Well,
it's
and then
really,
Highland Park
really,
wasn't even on the list of the most games played.
I know, right? Which
That's
is insane.
what makes that staggering.
Right, exactly.
875 wins in program history to not even make the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Right.
I mean, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, talk about consistency there. But yeah, I think this one's probably just the most impressive. And I think no matter how you look at it, it's really impressive. I think it's very telling about, the consistency of these programs. And it's kind of fun to look at because you can look at some of these programs and be like, oh yeah, I remember back in the heyday, when Odessa Permian was the powerhouse, or even Euless Trinity. Or you look at some of the more recent powerhouses like South Lake Carroll or Austin Westlake, or you look at the ones like Highland Park that have just been consistent throughout their entire tenure as a program.
And yeah, and that goes a lot further than just, and we talked about it in our 6-year power rankings. You go through, okay, well, that gives you a sample size of not just one class being really good from freshman to senior year. You've got that turnover rate there. It's the same thing here. There's been turnover. Like, now, yes, you take South Lake Carroll for an example, is Todd Dodge was the coach of South Lake Carroll when they were really in their heyday, when all the state championships came in. Now they've been reintroduced to that with Riley Dodge. And so it's funny to see how most of these, it wasn't just the one tenure of, now some of the programs, the guy like Randy Allen has been at Highland Park forever. So there are the occasions like that where you can say, man, he's just one of the best coaches in Texas high school football. But a lot of these, you could see the difference in turnover in coaches, in administration. And that's when you start going, it's more than just the crop of kids at that point.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like West Orange Shark, they've got a new coach this year. What are they going to do? How are they going to continue on this winning tradition that they've established over the past couple of years?
Yeah, and Hiawatha Hickman has been, last year was his first year, but he was the defensive coordinator under Cornell Thompson for 15 years.
Right.
So it's like that tradition. And most of the time, you want to talk about another thing, is most of the time it seems like these programs that have had continued success always find a really good way of keeping hires going through internally.
Right.
They hire that you go from the Todd Dodge to the Riley Dodge era. You go from, this to, I mean, even Todd Dodge, when he went down to Westlake, it was his wife's father who was the longtime head coach at Westlake, but you continue that on, and West Orange Shark is doing the same thing. Cornell Thompson and Hiawatha Hickman are not related, but they've fallen under each other for so long. Right.
I can't remember what his name is, but the Euless Trinity head coach now is the son of the he was back in their heyday when they were really, really good. That was his dad.
Nice.
So they've kind of kept that in the family there as well. But yeah, it's really cool to look at those raw numbers like that and the percentages and stuff like that. But I really hope we continue to do this as much as we can for a while, because I really, really do learn a lot, even just doing this research of looking into all of these different Texas high school football record books. And I think it's super interesting. So we'll continue to do this over the next couple of weeks now. We'll probably start getting more into regional previews like we did last year as we get closer to football season. But as of right now, I think we can continue this series because I think it's kind of fun.